The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. It's brought to you by Agile Alliance. I've said that multiple times where it's brought to you by Agile Alliance, but, really, in reality, it's brought to you by the members of the Agile Alliance. The Agile Alliance is a community that's been formed up since the foundations of the manifesto, and this community has contributed so much over the last 20 years of Agile in order to make things better for the entire industry and the entire community that we work in. And so I'm privileged to host this podcast. It's made possible by the contributions that are made by the people in the Agile community. And this is sort of our give back to the rest of you who have been supporting us over the years. And there's a set of thought leaders that I get with and work with every year and have the privilege of sitting down with them and spending a long weekend at either a company or a business that I so much enjoy to hear their perspectives, because they go through a really long year of learning, similar to myself, but their perspectives are ones of looking at big corporate transformations associated to what particular industry initiative that we have, which is the Supporting Agile Adoption Work Group. And I learned so much from these people, and I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves in this particular special that we have today. By the way, if you notice, we don't have the whole big audience here today. It's just a small group of people having a great conversation together. So to kick that off, Hendrik, if you can let people know who you are, and maybe if you give us some perspective of what was your key learning for 2020.
I'm happy to be here in this special edition of the Agile Coaching Network. Yeah, who I am. I'm Henrik, Manager Special Projects at Ericsson. Fantastic title. I'm the wild animal working across the company on all sorts of transformation initiatives. And this year has been, of course, when I think about what is the learning, there is so many learnings. But for our workshop this weekend, I picked out one that is really sticking, and that is the paraphrasing is draw people, not boxes. And what this is about is very often when we discuss organizational designs, and this is one of my hobbies at the moment, we have org charts and we have process descriptions and we have all these charts, but what's missing there is the people. So my experience is that when we take these org charts away and we just draw the people in the organization, and then we ask the question and have a discussion about who's talking to whom, about what. So when we want to achieve a certain thing, a certain use case of the organization, if you will, how does this work through the organization? It creates a wonderful discussion across people in the organization on how is this really working? How are we working together? And it always works for me. I had so many good experiences in doing this.
How about you, John?
My key learning of the year is deeper understanding of what I already knew, which is how important it is to take time to reflect. And this is just such a valuable reflection time that we've had past few days, and I look forward to doing this again next year. This is a very special group of people. So thank you.
Awesome. Jutta.
I'm Jutta Eckstein, and one of my learnings is really related to what Hendrik said. He said, it's more important who is talking to whom and not so much like what kind of boxes there are. So looking more at the people. And I guess we all learned from, way back when, Conway's Law, that it's actually the way people communicate is what defines later on the structure of a product, a design, a service, whatever. So this is one of the learnings. However, my learning over the year is probably mostly driven by the Black Lives Matter movement, that diversity matters. And derived from Conway's Law, I learned that an organization actually produces a design that reflects the organization's bias. So it's not only the communication structure that has an influence on services, products, and designs, but also the the bias of the organization.
Wonderful. Jorgen.
Hi there. Thank you for having me back again. This was a wonderful time. Of course, I'm like John. I do enjoy actually seeing everyone in person, but this is definitely the second best thing. So great to be back again. I am Jorgen Hesselberg. I'm the co-founder of Comparative Agility and author of Unlocking Agility. And for me, I think it's been two lessons that I wrote up, and it's kind of, it has a lot to do with what we're going through. There's no way to get around that. And for me, it's sort of a positive and a negative, I guess. The positive was never waste a good crisis. I think that is a saying that came from Rahm Emanuel back in the days of Obama White House. And his point was that when there is a crisis, there is also opportunity. And I think that is exactly the case for us in the Agile community also. I think this pandemic has given us a lot of opportunity, not just us as part of the core community, but I think people in general are seeing that agility and more agile ways of working is absolutely critical. And it's opened up people's minds to take some chances and do some things that they normally wouldn't have done. And I've already seen a lot of examples of that. So I think it's a lot of positive that comes with that. The other part of it, though, is the flip side, and goes back to what Agile is all about, which really is about making work more humane, isn't it? And I think that this pandemic has also made it hard for us as people, because technology has saved us in many ways, and many of us are privileged. So we have jobs, we can be entertained at home, we can work at home, we can do all these wonderful things at home. But we're still not together, and we're still not really being together as people. We're sort of little faces in boxes, and I do think that has an effect on us. And I think it's okay not to be okay. Also, we need to recognize that, and this whole idea of self-care has been something that I really haven't thought much about until this year. So this has been a good lesson for me. So good to be back, though, and to be with good friends again. It's funny for me how we haven't really seen each other that much, but then once we see each other again, it's almost like it was just last week since we spoke. So that's been great.
That's awesome. Marcin.
It's so lovely to be here with all of you and spend another time together, learning and reflecting on this very special and unusual in many ways year. I'm Marcin Florian, and I work at Spotify. Been there for a few years now and had an opportunity to work with a part of the company, but in last year especially had also an opportunity to go a bit broader and get involved in some of the company-wide initiatives. So when I reflect on my main learning for last year, I think I'm going to put together what Jorgen just mentioned and what Jutta mentioned, because Jorgen talked about opportunity. And for me, this unusual year has been quite an extraordinary opportunity to meet people in a different way than we were used to. Like, for one, we meet each other mostly online, but that also means that we're meeting each other in our homes with the background of the family or the pets. So it's a very special opportunity, and has been, to really see each other for fully who we are, with all the little kinks and interests, and the families and the nice big houses and the small apartments. But I think, connecting back to Jutta's point about Black Lives Matter, I think this opportunity and the realization that we're so diverse creates almost this call for action for me, is to use that opportunity to really learn about each other, to be interested and curious, because suddenly we had this whole group of people that many of us were completely unaware of in terms of the realities that they were facing. And if we can really keep that curiosity, learn about those realities, and enrich our diversity of thought and our diversity of points of view, then we can really work better together and build better products.
My name is Jens from Munich. I'm an Agile dinosaur and managing director of a consulting firm in Munich. And well, there are two things I've learned this year. One is you'd better listen to Hendrik's learnings, because I really like this draw people, not boxes. This really triggers something in me. So thanks for sharing that one. And the other one, well, after 20 years, I finally figured out that Agile does work. We weren't completely unknown situation when the Corona lockdown started. Within a few weeks, we were taken from business as usual to business in a domain no one ever did before. And it's really helped to have basic understanding on how to react in situations like that. And the companies that were able to react had a significant advantage there. And though, well, let's be straight, it sucks a little bit with all these lockdown and not being able to have parties and whatever. But also there are new opportunities, new ways of working, and I'm interested in what's going to emerge there in the next years. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person again and going for fine lunch. However, being able to do this maybe several times a year also is a new opportunity. And this is only a small tip of the iceberg of what becomes possible. If we use, or if we're able to reuse the old techniques and also combine them with what we've learned this year. Going to be an interesting 2021.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Bjarte.
Hi, everybody. This is Bjarte Boksnes. I'm based in the finance team, corporate team, in a company called Equinor. We used to be called Statoil. I'm also the chairman of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. And some of you might wonder, what is a finance guy like me working with Beyond Budgeting doing at an Agile session like this with all these great Agile minds? Some of you might know the answer. The answer is that Beyond Budgeting is a misleading name. Beyond Budgeting is basically about business agility. And as I will come back to later, no organization will succeed on their Agile journey without also addressing the stuff that we are addressing in Beyond Budgeting. It is as simple and as difficult as that. My main learning for 2020 is that this crisis is in some way different from many other crises that we've experienced. For instance, the financial crisis. And let me explain why. Traditional management is based on two core assumptions. The first one is that the future is not predictable and plannable, and that was demonstrated through the finance crisis and a lot of other stuff we have been through. So there's nothing new. But what is new is that the other assumption, the other myth behind traditional management has been busted this time, because that assumption is that people can't be trusted. But what we have seen through the pandemic, through the homework, people have been trusted, whether executives liked it or not, and it worked. So if there is anything good coming out of this crisis, it is these two giant holes in the two assumptions behind traditional management.
So we also have somebody who wasn't able to join us today for the recording of the podcast. Does anyone want to give Eric an introduction?
Eric Abelen, I think is the right way to pronounce him in Dutch. And so he's from the Netherlands, and I'm not. That's why my pronunciation might be wrong. He works for ING as a coach, and he's doing that for quite some years. Has started, I believe, in HR as a coach, and then went on to helping teams. And at the moment, probably also because of all the stuff that's happening this year, is again on a shift into a different position. And I'm not sure, I think his key learning of the year or at the moment is that you always have to aware of things that are happening, and so also be prepared, because you might think you're on a good journey, for example, with your Agile transformation, but sometimes things can happen quickly and you might not really notice it. So yeah, better stay alert and recognize that the journey is ongoing. It's not an end to it. So that's kind of what I recognize. And anyone else, please jump in.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing he also said, and I think that's an experience that many of us share, that an agile company culture is a great preparation for a crisis like this, because his company, like many of our companies who did an agile transformation managed to shift from in the office to work from home within a week or something like this. All of it, there was no productivity loss, nothing. I mean, it was really like shift, bang, and we are there. And I think this is I share this learning that we had this year, that with the agile culture, you are extremely well prepared for these kind of crises.
That's an interesting contrast to my neighbor. She's working in public administration, and they still haven't done the shift by now. So,
well, it's awesome.
Maybe they are not in an agile culture, because that's what Eric, Abel, and Hendrik then also said. If you are in that agile culture, then you are per se already prepared for a change like that, which is actually what you said earlier as well. When you said like agile works.
Well, it's awesome that, one thing is he contributed a lot over the weekend. And I just wanted to make sure that we gave him some acknowledgement, because a lot of what we're talking about was influenced by his input to the group. And my name's Ray Arell. You guys know me. I've been hosting this podcast. I think that this year for me was about connections. And for myself, I've noticed that I traveled the world probably 8 times around the world consistently for the last decade. And I've met a lot of great people through those connections. But what I found is that as 2020 hit, and we've had a couple of family issues within my family, that I really saw the community then give back to me. And that to me warms my heart that I've picked the right tribe of people to be around. That was one aspect. The other aspect is just, and this as we transition into what we're talking about today, I've also seen the resiliency of Agile adoptions within groups have gone through these multiple different waves of transformation over the years. And as the way that we do the marketplace for our little meeting on the weekend, we put down our topics, and I threw up this notion of death spiral. And I hate the word death spiral because matter of fact, I adapted that and called it a life and death spiral. But that got clumped together with something that we wanted to talk about as a key thing for this year. And just to set the stage for this is, as you guys know, as we go through Agile adoptions, and you've seen this with multiple organizations where they go through very well supported leadership supporting across the board, high levels of resiliency and resources and everything, to when either an outside influence or an inside influence changes that, and we start to spiral down where it loses influence or loses its ability to be able to be as effective as it could as a culture and as practices go. And that particular set of topics itself, I thought were really great as far as our conversations. And just to kick that off as a prompting question, why did this particular topic, and anyone can start here, why was this the top of mind for each of you?
I think one thing that triggered this discussion was also that we see this in several companies, and the company I work for is one example, which had its waves. So a big uptake on Agile, then a downturn on Agile again, and we cheerfully called it the Empire Strikes Back a moment in your company. And then comes the return of the Jedi, and Agile comes back again, but maybe in a different and more mature form. That's at least the experience I have made. First, it was about Agile, then it was a downturn, and now it's coming back, and it's more about agility and not Agile alone. So that was part of this discussion, I think, that triggered the discussion. So is it really a death spiral? No, it's just a wave. And I think someone of us was bringing in this idea of waves.
I think that was me. I'm the one to blame here. And I think the understanding why things not only go up, but also go down is very important to actually get a better understanding of what Agile adoptions are about. There's a hell of things to learn from why things go back again. And I think the first thing we need to learn about that is it's not a battle of good and evil. So though I really like the Star Wars metaphor, it's actually conflicting forces here. And unless we understand the forces and learn how to better serve the conflicting forces and serve their needs, I think the more successful we will be in the future. So I think there's just a hell of things to learn in there.
My impression is that I'm seeing is that often when people focus on agile transformation, they focus mostly on processes. Even if they think about agility, then they look at processes in like the marketing department or sales or wherever, and maybe also more like across departments. But what they typically don't look at is the structure, and all three things, processes, strategy, and structure, have to come together in order to really sustain whatever transformation you are doing. And in this case, it's natural transformation. And if you're focusing only on one of those areas, then it easily falls apart again, and we come into that spiral.
So we also talked, and I think I've reflected on this a little bit, about the fact that we very often talk about the agile transformation, which may sometimes imply that there is an end in sight, that this is something that we do, and then if we do it and it comes to an end, then something new comes, and that might be the new wave. And very often for many organizations that have to some extent internalized this, what Henrik was saying, like this agility, it stops being about getting to somewhere. It's about a journey that is ongoing and that it never ends. And we're discovering new things along. And as long as we can keep with the same set of maybe values and principles and beliefs, then we can carry on.
Was what Eric Abelin also said, kind of that the journey is ongoing and it's not an end to it. And if you believe there's an end to it, then actually it's a recipe for that it falls apart.
I got thinking about ecosystems, and then specifically biological ecosystems, where and that word resilience in ecosystems comes to play for me, because if you look at the resounding wave of when things go into a depressed mode, or, when we think about a rebirth cycle, that there's a healthy balance that happens within organizations, like corporate organizations, that's swinging all the time, either one direction or another. And that balance, I think, is what's key and important to it, which is if you swing it too far one direction, the system goes out of whack, and then suddenly the entire system suffers. But Bjarte, what did you have on this?
I fully agree on what's said here about this being a journey where the direction is clearer than the destination, if there is one. And this is something we've always said about beyond budgeting. It is not a project. But I think whatever kind of wave you are in, there are something that's permanent here when it comes to the systems, because on any agile adoption, I think is a better word, there are two elephants in the room. And I'm talking about the budgeting process and performance management processes related to performance evaluation and rewards. And if these processes are left untouched, unchallenged, there will never be any agile adoption whatsoever. So, and I think looking at some of those journeys that have struggled now, I think this is one of the reasons. For different reasons, it could be fear, could be power, control, I don't know. These two areas have not been addressed, and I think that's a big issue.
I was struck by the image of a groundswell where the trough of the wave is so deep that it actually exposes the floor of the water, and that will wreck the big boat. And the trick is what do you do if you're facing a groundswell?
Like these analogies are always useful, and it kind of makes us think differently about these fairly complex topics. But I do think it comes down to something really simple also. And I think when it comes to agile transformations or working in more agile ways, if you want to call it that, and the reason they sometimes lose some of their momentum, I think, is that you don't often do a very good job of tying it back to business outcomes. I think very often we focus, much like Jutta is saying, on sort of these vanity metrics, the metrics that don't really mean anything to the business. We focus on processes, we focus on procedures or tools or all these kind of things. But at the end of the day, agile or agility is a means to an end. I mean, it isn't the point in itself. Yes, we want to do more humane organizations. Yes, we want to make sure we can be adapt quicker and all those kind of things. But because we are in an environment with lots of uncertainty, VUCA, and that's why these things work. But we have to tie it back and show in very meaningful terms how an agile way of working actually helps the business. Because at the end of the day, well, that's kind of why we do this. We try to help our businesses thrive and the people in them. So I think that's one thing that we can do even more of. And I think as you kind of show how we're actually making progress on objective business metrics, I think that fuel, that energy to continue the journey is easier than if we don't do those kind of things. And then we sort of we forget why we were there in the first place. So that's one learning I've had for this year.
Jürgen, one thing you can do is educate people on what VUCA is, please.
Yeah. Well, I think it actually comes back from the U.S. War College. It's an old term, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
I want to link it back to something Hendrik started with, which is, well, when we started with Agile, we thought this as a kind of alternative process. We were fighting against the rational unified process, 6,000 pages. Then we started to understand that this is not about process.
You mean like safe now?
No comment on that. Then we started to say, okay, it's probably not process, because we saw that we would invite all kind of strange things into that. So we came up with this idea, Agile is a mindset, which is still pretty autistic. And if you look at that, what we're needing today is neither process nor not mindset. What we need is capabilities, organizational capabilities, which links to what Peter says. You have to understand which parts and structures in your organizations are impeding you as being agile as a capability, being able to react fast. And looking at budgeting process is probably a pretty good guess. And being more agile there would help a lot of companies.
Although I have to say one thing here, and that is an interesting observation as well. And I think you brought this notion in, Jens, in the workshop, compliance versus empowerment and experimentation. There is not the one size fits all thing. Depending on the context and situation, you need to, and that's the core for me of agility, you need to be able to switch the way you approach the problem depending on the problem. And when you are, like the company I work for, when you are entering into a phase where the business is going very, very tricky, you're not profitable anymore. And if you continue that path, your agility will probably not help you to hit the wall, to not hit the wall. Then maybe, and that's what happened for our company, the financial controllers took control. Then it was about compliance. We need to get order and discipline back into the budgets, because now is not the time for wild experimentation. We need to get order into the thing. And maybe that was, when I now look back into the history of the last years of this company, we are back to positive figures. Yeah? So just that for some time, something else was more applicable or more fit for purpose than the Agile approach.
Hendrik, I think you should explain a little bit more, because it sounds like, well, then we looked on the costs and we didn't do experiments, but now we are in the positive figures. I think what you left out is that you are now in the last, 1.5 years or so, are very, very strong and supportive in experimentation on all levels.
Yes.
And that this is really motivated for everyone to do, and I think that made the difference.
We had a moment where the company was in a critical state, and in that moment, we needed to really get control of our financial situation and so on. But we kept this as short as possible. So now we are executing financially in a very disciplined way still, but at the same time, we started to open up for experimentation, company-wide experimentation as early as possible. And that is a strong accelerator, and that has also reactivated, if you will, in the company. So it's actually wonderful to work in this company at the moment, because there's a lot of things going on that are going into a really good direction.
Beata, you had some comments to add to this.
I think one more reflection on why some journeys and maybe many are struggling. And I think it has something to do with the birthplace of Agile and also Lean for that sake. I mean, Lean was born in manufacturing. Agile was born in, or the Agile Manifesto was at least developed by software people, right? And they were great initial successes. And I think one reason was that in big companies, what was observed from upstairs was faster projects, lower cost, more happy people. I mean, who can be against that? Wonderful, great work. Keep up the good work. And then both of these concepts started to scale, right? And scaling Agile. And suddenly it started to have implications and consequences for executives' beliefs and behaviors. And then it wasn't that fun anymore. I think that's one part of the problem. The other thing is that I think it's hard to use exactly the same language and framework that worked so well back then in software development as ways of running an organization. So you need some kind of translation. And again, with my beyond budgeting hat on, I think that is what something also beyond budgeting can bring, because we have a language that these guys, at least they understand what we talk about. They might disagree, but they understand. So again, I think Agile and beyond budgeting is a beautiful fit because it's all about business agility.
Now, you bring up something then, this is probably a good transition point to what we're talking about when we think about the last 20 years of Agile and Agile development. But Agile development, as we all know, stretches back, if you think of foundational components that came into the thoughts and minds of the people of the manifesto, that stretches back into the 1930s and the 1940s, as far as the thinking of anything from iterative development to Deming's circle of how things are put together, to just even Toyota production systems and those things as well. So with that, Agile has now, over the last several decades, has combined or morphed or has been brought together with other things to make it stronger or more resilient or better, or maybe it's just a part of the ecosystem of methods and mindset and culture. What is all of your perspective on, if you reflect upon the last 20 years, reflect about also where we're going? And John, did you have a comment to this?
Yeah, just by way of summary of what we were just on and going into that, for me, I remember when I played during our session 5 Whys. Why do you want to be Agile? And the answer for me came out to be, well, it's survival of the fittest. And if you're not Agile, then you're like the Sears, Roebuck, or Kodak, or any of the companies that's fallen on its face recently. And if you are, then you survive. And so it's a new adaptive evolution in the way we organize. So we have to ask then, all right, what do we see in the next 20 years? Where are we going with all this? And one of the things we talked about was, well, how do you be Agile at the top? Do you certify managers? Do you have Agile coaches for executives? And that was reflected on by the thought that, well, you don't really want to certify people because then you freeze things and you're better off operating from principles. And that for me was the transition to this topic.
Well, I think the problem is also the thing that we just saw before, that so far we have focused on processes, but we still are in a way of understanding what does it mean to make Agile sustainable in the company. And it means to also look in different areas. Beyond budgeting is definitely one area. It's also implementing the feedback in the structure so it can't be ignored any longer, for example, or also on the strategy, that this is really also done in an Agile way. And I think we are still at a place where we discover all of that. And yes, it has been created or originated in software. However, almost all companies are software companies now. So I'm not sure if this is still a hindrance. Maybe it is a hindrance in who is it who is talking to people who are more dealing with strategy or structure, because we might, thinking of now as we might use a different vocabulary that is appropriate at the different areas. So that's probably at least one of the things.
Again, I think there's a difference between what is happening now and what has happened the last 20 years, which is about now we are connecting the dots. Right? I mean, these communities are talking together in ways that did not happen 20 years ago, right? Again, when Beyond Budgeting started out, there was no contact with any other community, and now I'm sitting here as one example. And I think that's a very positive sign, because I think this will make it all broader and more holistic and more coherent, where we are addressing all aspects of this from all different angles, and it will be much more powerful as such. So I'm very optimistic, and that might imply a new name for this as well. I mean, even that's not the most important, but maybe. Then one reflection on John's comment. I think, of course, executives' beliefs, it typically comes from their education. And when today's executives, many who attended business schools, when they had their education, there was nothing at all about this stuff. A piece of good news, there is a textbook called Management Control Systems. I think it's part of the curriculum at every single business school in the world. And now Beyond Budgeting is in there with quite a substantial chapter about what this stuff is, right? So things are happening.
As I'm reflecting a little bit on this next 20 years or whatever the future brings, I think like two things that come to my mind, and many of you have already mentioned this notion of integrating the organizations, like no longer looking at the sections and the like software development department and other departments, but thinking about our organizations as a whole, as an integrity, and how all these components or structures interact with each other. And I think we've talked a little bit over the weekend that a lot of the knowledge and the thoughts that Agile has been based on have already been around in the 60s and in the 70s. So I think for me, I hope that a little bit of that future will be reintegrating all this stuff that we already know, rediscovering this. I think, Ray, you had a nice list of good references that we could look back into and really leverage it even more explicitly rather than implicitly using it through things like Scrum.
Yeah, I really like John's remark on evolutionary perspective. And if will there be Agile in 20 years? Well, this is connected to the question, will there be any demand for flexible organizations in 20 years? And I think Agile has done its part of allowing more speed, more change, and more adaptability. And if we think that things will become more stable in the next 20 years, we probably don't need Agile there anymore. But, well, chances are that this is not a very realistic view. So if we look at climate change, if we look at the political things that are currently going on and seem to get it a little bit better again, there will be a lot of challenges facing also companies to adapt whatever is going on there. So there will be tremendous need for agility of big organizations. And those who talk about beyond Agile, they usually do two mistakes. One is they confuse Agile with Scrum, which is something and they underestimated the ability of the Scrum Guide to adapt. Scrum has shown enormous adaptability already. So, but I think that this is not the major question. The question is, how can we make organizations more flexible? And I still think that the ideas from 20 years ago will play an important part there. And I think connecting the dots to other ideas that are at least as old is also an important part. What name we're going to put to that, I don't care.
Well, looking 20 years ahead, I think we still have a lot of homework to do. So I mentioned before, like, what are we working on right now? But there's also a lot of stuff ahead of us. And I'm just looking at, for example, the visions of both the Agile Alliance and the Scrum Alliance. So the Agile Alliance says it's a nonprofit organization committed to supporting people who explore and apply Agile values, principles, and practices to make building software solutions more effective, humane, and sustainable. Scrum Alliance says it's a nonprofit organization that is guiding and inspiring individuals, leaders, and organizations with agile practices, principles, and values to help create workplaces that are joyful, prosperous, and sustainable. And I think so far we haven't done anything around that sustainability aspect. And I think this is really a big thing we all should work on. And if we say that this is something that's important to us, and well, just right now, also it has been mentioned, like things like climate change and so on. Well, we all know that software, and with digitalization, there will be even more software. We contribute to actually the climate change, not in a positive way. And I think we have to work on that. So this is a huge homework that we have to do. And it is in the vision of our main nonprofit organizations in the Agile spectrum. So we should get back to work.
Yeah, this was in the end, I think we need to find a way how to adapt to a more sustainable, or adapt to the constraint that this, our planet is a limited resource, you could say. I think it was Martin in the workshop who said, like, oh, if one market is exhausted, we just open another market, we go into another market. We are not going to compete the same market with too many because it's not worthwhile doing it. Well, when we look at humanity, there's only one market. It's this planet. And I think the chances that we are finding a better planet within the next 20, 30 years, which are absolutely critical for the survival of mankind, it's not a realistic option, I think, although some people want to go to Mars and build something there. That's another thing. So I think we need to find a way how we adapt our organizations towards a world which is actually limited, where growth cannot go endlessly and where we need to be more sustainable.
The thing Jutta and I have been finding lately is that as we've tried to explain to people how to probe, which in Cynefin terms means experiments and hypotheses and sitting and thinking, and actually check out new things, that the understanding of how to do that is just not out there. We've even resorted to showing people the little videos about the scientific process that are made for 8th graders. And they're going, oh, and I don't know why, but if you just look at the fact that a lot of people were saying, let us do more work at home before COVID, and the organizations were going, oh, I don't know whether you can really do that. And then suddenly it hit and everybody was working at home. So the probing, checking out process wasn't working. So a growth that we need to have in the next 20 years is getting those company structures a lot more truly agile, really being able to probe and adjust in ways that the bureaucracy doesn't sit on.
I have a very simple prediction for what lies ahead, 20 years ahead. In 20 years' time, we are going to smile and maybe have a laugh about what was traditional for the internet. And it isn't that long. This stuff will happen in some form or shape. And again, I couldn't care what it's called, but it will happen. And as organizations can choose to be early movers and get competitive advantage, or they can choose to be dragged into this as one of the last ones. I think that's a pretty simple choice.
I really like what you said, Bjarke. We will look back on it and smile. I just, in this session here, came up with, for myself, with the term computer-assisted socialization. That's what we have right now. And so the computer-assisted everything is coming. I think it's inevitable, and it's both exciting and scary. So that's a big unknown, and we owe a lot of responsibility to ourselves. We have a high responsibility to make sure that computer-assisted doesn't become computer dictatorship.
Yeah, especially if you look at how this very simple thing of social networks actually fueled autocrats and dictatorships all over the world. And as far as I remember, the beginnings of the internet, this was not the intention. And I think we also have to be very careful about what's happening with Agile. We've seen places where it has been used to really exploit people, to really do very, very bad stuff. And we have to be very careful that I think this will be an evolutionary thing, but we need to be careful that the right people get extinct in there. And this is where values come in. So we need to make sure that those organizations that really understand that being adaptable is something a gift they can bring into society, and that their personal and competitive advantage will not be by killing others, but by contributing to society, that these organizations will actually have the not only the competitive, but the evolutionary advantage. And this is nothing we can do only from an Agile perspective. This is something the society has to take care of. And I'm not really sure whether our societies did a very good job on that in the last 20 years.
This is interesting. I just read today an article in the CACM. So the ACM is one of our communities also, so more the science IT communities. And there the author made a point that it's about time that we in IT start solving societal problems that we have created in the first place with the software we've created. So it's more or less that we should also take the responsibility for the damage we have made, probably.
Yes.
And
yes.
On the other hand, I'm also not sure if we are capable of doing it. And I'm more thinking of how much do we really know about like society and stuff. We are all not like educated in that field, but on the other hand, it was easy for us to create the problem. So yeah.
Well, I think lessons come down to, as we wrap up the hour, I mean, one of my key takeaways was that a healthy ecosystem is made up of diversity. And I think that, when I hear, old conversations that we had in the 1980s of the number of testers to developers, and boy, we wouldn't have all these defects if we didn't have all those testers. So let's go get rid of the testers and these waves of fluctuations that were occurring, that we didn't have a diverse environment around us. And I think when we talk about anything from sustainability to leadership to, bringing in new methods and concepts and ideas and other things, it just to me screams of the way that we build resiliency and the way that we move forward in the next 20 years is about the diversity that's behind the conversations that are there. And that means that not standing for Agile's sake, but standing and saying that, look, Agile is a part of the way that we're going to move forward. And yes, it's beyond budgeting that's brought into it. It's all sorts of other different methods and methodologies and mindsets, and sort of a renaissance of how we move forward is going to be, again, that diversity that we go create. And with that, we're at the top of the hour, and oh my goodness, this year, this is the capstone of my year. This is absolutely what that I look most forward to. If someone says, what's under your Christmas tree? I would say that it's this meeting and workshop that I go to every year. And it was kind of sad that we weren't able to all enjoy, a lovely beverage someplace, at a nice venue somewhere. But I can tell you that all of you are in my hearts and my mind of how we move forward into the new year. And everyone here that's listening to all of us, always keep in mind that this community of people, the supporting Agile adoption community, is a very open community, meaning that if you have contributions that you want to give and you want to add some thoughts to what we've talked about, we want to hear those. So I encourage you to join the Slack channel for the ACN. That's one method that you can go off and reach in and ask questions or just give comments to. But I do, in fact, want you to hit the nice little love button on wherever you're getting your podcast, because the more love and comments that come back to us, the better that we make this show for all of you. Call for abstracts for Agile 2021. Those are going to be coming up soon. So think about those thoughts and ideas. Agile 2021 will happen, but more than likely not going to happen as a physical event.
And call for submissions for the XP 2021.
Thank you.
Is coming up as well.
I was getting to that as well, which is another spectacular event as well. We at the Agile Alliance understand that we want safety first and foremost for our community. And so if you think about we're constantly looking at what's going on with COVID, and even with the vaccine coming in, we don't believe that a conference in the middle of summer is going to probably be feasible. So we are looking at it's going to be a virtual event, which means more access, more people can join. There's a lower barrier to entry. That all will be announced in the next couple of months. The conference teams are working both feverishly to come up with good programs of learning. So I want to encourage you to be a part of that and also to join in. And if you're not an Agile Alliance member, that support, by the way, makes this podcast possible, and it also makes the other 12 initiatives that we're running possible as well. Especially if you heard Yuta's comment about wanting to have sustainability. Guess what? Your support, either in-kind contributions or just becoming a member, helps us to go fund those things. And with that, I'm going to bid you all a happy New Year and a happy holidays. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.